Most people believe the dangerous person in the room is easy to recognize: a cold face, an aggressive voice, someone who dominates through fear. Yet some of the most psychologically powerful people move through life very differently. They stay calm, they listen carefully, they make others feel emotionally safe within minutes. People open up to them naturally, secrets come out easily around them, pain becomes visible around them. And that is where the danger quietly begins. Empaths are usually described as kind, caring, emotionally sensitive people who deeply understand human feelings. Society teaches people to trust emotional intelligence automatically. The more emotionally aware someone appears, the safer they seem. Yet psychology reveals a darker reality that very few people talk about openly. Some people develop empathy without developing emotional morality. They learn how human emotions work so well that they can influence thoughts, reactions, attachment, guilt, and even emotional dependency with frightening precision. This hidden personality type is sometimes called the dark empath. Unlike traditional manipulators, dark empaths rarely appear toxic at first. They feel warm, intelligent, deeply understanding. They know how to say the perfect thing during emotional moments. They understand insecurities quickly. They study emotional reactions carefully, and over time, they quietly learn where people are emotionally weakest. The unsettling part is that many dark empaths do not fully realize how much control they have over others. Emotional intelligence becomes a psychological weapon almost by accident. A comforting sentence can become manipulation. Emotional support can slowly become emotional control. And because the connection feels genuine in the beginning, people rarely notice the shift until the emotional damage becomes deep. In this video, you will learn why dangerous empaths are so difficult to detect, how emotional intelligence can become manipulation, why some people use empathy strategically, and how emotionally aware individuals gain influence without using force or intimidation. You will also discover the difference between emotional empathy and cognitive empathy, the psychological traits connected to dark empath behavior, and the subtle patterns that reveal when emotional understanding is being used for control instead of connection. Some of the facts in this video come from psychological studies surrounding personality behavior, emotional manipulation, and dark triad traits. And the deeper this video goes, the more uncomfortable the subject becomes. Because many people eventually realize they have encountered someone exactly like this before, sometimes in relationships, sometimes in friendships, sometimes inside their own family. By the end of this video, you will understand why the most dangerous person emotionally is rarely the loudest person in the room. Sometimes the greatest psychological influence comes from the person who understands human emotions the best. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy deep psychological analysis, human behavior, and emotionally intense storytelling, subscribe now and become part of the community. Let us begin. Most people hear the word empath and immediately think of someone gentle, someone emotionally safe, someone who absorbs pain and gives comfort back in return. Movies, books, and social media often describe empaths almost like emotionally gifted healers. People assume empathy naturally creates kindness, and because of that assumption, emotionally intelligent people are trusted very quickly. The moment someone appears deeply understanding, most defenses quietly disappear. That reaction happens almost automatically in human psychology. People feel safer around someone who listens carefully, someone who notices emotional shifts, someone who remembers small emotional details. It creates the feeling of connection very fast, and that feeling can become extremely powerful, especially during moments of loneliness, emotional stress, or vulnerability. But empathy itself is more complicated than most people realize. Psychologists often separate empathy into different categories. One form is emotional empathy. That is when someone genuinely feels the emotions of another person. Another person's sadness becomes emotionally painful for them too. Another person's fear creates real emotional discomfort inside them. Their reaction comes from shared feeling. Then there is cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy works differently. Instead of emotionally feeling another person's pain, the individual understands it intellectually. They can read emotional reactions very accurately. They notice tone changes, facial tension, silence, hesitation, emotional insecurity. They understand what somebody is feeling without emotionally absorbing the experience themselves. And that difference changes everything. Because a person can understand emotions deeply while remaining emotionally detached at the same time. They know when someone feels insecure. They know when someone wants approval. They know when someone fears abandonment. They recognize emotional weakness almost instantly. Yet emotional understanding alone does not automatically create compassion. In some people, emotional awareness becomes observation instead of connection. Human emotions become patterns to study rather than experiences to share. That is why some emotionally intelligent individuals become incredibly persuasive. They know exactly how to calm someone down, how to gain trust, how to create emotional closeness quickly. They understand which words lower emotional defenses, which behaviors create attachment, which emotional wounds still affect someone years later. And most people never notice the difference in the beginning because cognitive empathy can look almost identical to genuine care on the surface. The voice still sounds warm, the attention still feels real, the emotional understanding still feels comforting. But underneath that calm emotional awareness, there can sometimes be emotional distance instead of emotional connection. The ability to read pain does not always mean the desire to heal it, and that idea becomes deeply unsettling once people start recognizing how many emotionally intelligent individuals quietly move through life studying human emotion with extraordinary accuracy while feeling very little emotional responsibility toward the people they understand. Most people eventually recognize openly toxic behavior. Aggressive personalities usually expose themselves over time. Anger becomes visible. Control becomes obvious. Narcissists often leave a trail of tension behind them. The emotional pressure feels heavy around them. Conversations slowly become centered around their ego, their needs, their attention. Even highly manipulative people often reveal cracks in their behavior eventually because power rooted in dominance becomes difficult to hide forever. Dangerous empaths work differently. They rarely intimidate people in obvious ways. In fact, most people feel unusually comfortable around them at first. Conversations feel easy, emotional vulnerability feels natural. People begin sharing personal thoughts much faster than they normally would. That emotional safety feels genuine because dangerous empaths understand how to mirror emotional energy with incredible precision. When somebody speaks softly, they soften their tone too. When somebody talks about pain, they respond with calm understanding. When somebody feels insecure, they know exactly how to reassure them. Everything feels emotionally aligned. That emotional mirroring creates one of the strongest psychological effects in human behavior. People trust those who seem emotionally similar to themselves. The more emotionally understood someone feels, the faster emotional walls begin disappearing. And dangerous empaths know this instinctively. They ask thoughtful questions. They remember emotional details. They notice changes in mood immediately. Sometimes they even understand feelings people struggle to explain themselves. That level of emotional awareness creates a very deep sense of connection. Many people describe it as feeling seen for the first time. And that emotional experience becomes extremely powerful because most human beings spend years feeling misunderstood by the world around them. But hidden underneath that emotional closeness is something far more strategic. Every emotional confession becomes information. Every insecurity becomes insight. Every fear becomes emotional data. And slowly, without people realizing it, emotional intimacy becomes psychological access. Their empathy creates access, and access creates influence. Because once someone fully understands your emotional patterns, they begin predicting your reactions very accurately. They know which situations make you anxious, which words calm you down, which emotional wounds still affect your decisions. Over time, they learn how to guide emotional outcomes without appearing controlling on the surface. That is why these individuals become so difficult to detect. The manipulation rarely feels aggressive. It feels supportive, caring, patient, emotionally intelligent. And sometimes the people closest to them defend them the most because the emotional connection felt deeply real in the beginning. Even after emotional confusion starts appearing, many still hold on to the earlier version of the relationship. The understanding, the comfort, the feeling of emotional safety, which is exactly why dangerous empaths often remain hidden in plain sight for years while the people around them slowly become emotionally dependent on the very person quietly shaping their emotional reality behind the scenes. The manipulation phase rarely begins with obvious control. There are no dramatic threats in the beginning, no explosive behavior, no clear emotional attack. That is what makes the experience so psychologically confusing for many people. The changes happen slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. A small comment here, a subtle emotional reaction there. Tiny moments that seem harmless on the surface but slowly begin reshaping emotional reality over time. Dangerous empaths understand that direct control creates resistance. Emotional influence works far better when the other person feels emotionally connected instead of emotionally trapped. So instead of demanding control openly, they guide emotions carefully beneath the surface. Sometimes it begins with subtle guilt, a disappointed tone, a quiet withdrawal, a sentence designed to create emotional responsibility. Suddenly, the other person feels guilty without fully understanding why. Then comes emotional mirroring again. During emotional conversations, they reflect pain back with incredible accuracy. Their understanding feels almost therapeutic. People begin trusting them more deeply because very few individuals seem capable of understanding emotions so precisely. That trust becomes emotional leverage later. And one of the most powerful tools they use is strategic vulnerability. They reveal emotional pain at carefully chosen moments. They share stories that create sympathy. Emotional walls lower even further because vulnerability creates connection very quickly in human psychology. People naturally protect those who appear emotionally wounded, and dangerous empaths understand this instinct extremely well. Over time, emotional confusion quietly increases. Concerns become twisted into overreactions. Doubt becomes sensitivity. Pain becomes misunderstanding. Sometimes gaslighting arrives disguised as emotional care. They speak calmly while shifting reality underneath the conversation itself. They make someone question their emotional memory while appearing patient and compassionate at the same time. That combination becomes psychologically destabilizing because aggression would feel easier to identify. Calm manipulation feels far more confusing emotionally. And during all of this, they continue observing, quietly, constantly. They notice which insecurities create emotional reactions strongest, which fears create anxiety, which memories still carry emotional pain. Because they understand emotions deeply, they know exactly what hurts you, what triggers you, what you fear losing. And once someone reaches that level of emotional understanding, influence becomes extremely personal. They know where your emotional wounds are because you trusted them enough to show them. That is why many people stay emotionally attached even while slowly becoming emotionally exhausted. The emotional connection still feels real underneath the confusion. Moments of warmth still appear, understanding still appears, comfort still appears just enough to keep emotional hope alive. And the deeper the emotional bond becomes, the harder it becomes to separate genuine care from emotional control because dangerous empaths rarely destroy emotional connection completely. They maintain it carefully, just enough affection, just enough understanding, just enough emotional closeness to keep the attachment alive while emotional dependency quietly grows stronger beneath the surface. One of the most confusing parts of emotional manipulation is that the relationship rarely feels completely toxic all the time. If the behavior were constantly cold, aggressive, or emotionally cruel, many people would leave much earlier. But dangerous empaths understand something extremely important about human attachment. Emotional inconsistency creates stronger psychological dependence than constant emotional distance. That is why moments of warmth still appear. Sometimes they become incredibly caring again, emotionally available, protective, gentle. The same person who created emotional confusion suddenly becomes the source of emotional comfort again, and that shift creates a powerful emotional cycle inside the brain. Relief begins feeling intensely rewarding because emotional tension existed before it. A kind message suddenly feels deeply meaningful after emotional withdrawal. A small moment of affection feels emotionally overwhelming after confusion. Even basic emotional reassurance starts feeling valuable because uncertainty lowered emotional stability first. The brain becomes addicted to emotional relief after emotional uncertainty. And this is where many people become trapped emotionally without fully realizing it. They start chasing the return of emotional safety, the earlier version of the connection, the moments that felt genuine, because deep down, part of the relationship truly did feel real. Dangerous empaths are often capable of real emotional warmth in certain moments. That complexity makes everything harder to understand psychologically. The manipulation does not always feel intentional. The kindness does not always feel fake. The emotional connection still exists underneath the confusion, which keeps emotional hope alive for much longer than logic can explain. People begin questioning themselves instead of questioning the relationship. Maybe they are overthinking. Maybe they are too sensitive. Maybe the emotional distance is temporary. And during this confusion, emotional dependency grows even stronger because uncertainty keeps the brain emotionally focused on the relationship constantly. The mind starts analyzing every conversation, every emotional shift, every small change in behavior. Emotional stability slowly becomes connected to another person's approval, warmth, or attention. That emotional unpredictability creates psychological exhaustion. Yet strangely, it also deepens attachment. Because humans naturally seek resolution during emotional tension, the brain wants clarity, comfort, emotional balance again, and when the same person causing emotional confusion also provides emotional relief sometimes, the attachment becomes extremely difficult to break, especially when the manipulative behavior remains subtle. No screaming, no obvious cruelty, just emotional shifts that slowly destabilize confidence over time. One day the connection feels deeply intimate. The next day it feels emotionally distant. One moment they understand you completely. The next moment they make you question your own emotional reactions, and somewhere inside that cycle, many people slowly stop trusting their own instincts because emotional confusion becomes their normal emotional environment, while the dangerous empath quietly remains the emotional center of their psychological world. The most dangerous part of all of this is rarely the manipulation itself. Many people think manipulation always looks obvious: clear lies, open control, visible emotional abuse. But the deeper danger comes from something much more subtle: emotional precision. The ability to understand human emotion with such accuracy that emotional reactions can be guided almost effortlessly over time. Dangerous empaths study emotional patterns constantly, even when they appear relaxed on the surface. They notice how long it takes someone to reply after feeling hurt. They notice changes in breathing during emotional conversations. They notice which memories create silence, which insecurities create anxiety behind somebody's smile. Small emotional reactions that most people overlook become extremely valuable information to them. Because of this, they know exactly when to comfort someone, and they know exactly when to pull away. That timing becomes psychologically powerful. When a person feels emotionally overwhelmed, the dangerous empath suddenly becomes calm and supportive again. The emotional relief feels intense because the nervous system was already under stress. That comfort creates stronger attachment, stronger trust, stronger dependency. But when emotional closeness becomes too stable, they sometimes create distance again. A colder tone, less emotional attention, a delayed response, silence. And silence becomes one of the most powerful psychological tools of all because human beings naturally search for emotional meaning inside emotional absence. The mind starts analyzing everything. Overthinking grows stronger. Anxiety fills the emotional space where reassurance used to exist. Dangerous empaths understand this deeply. They know silence hurts more than words in certain moments. Because silence forces the other person to emotionally chase clarity, to chase reassurance, to chase connection. And slowly, emotional balance becomes controlled through unpredictable emotional availability. That is where the psychological control becomes frighteningly advanced. The manipulation no longer depends on force, it depends on emotional conditioning. Small emotional rewards, small emotional withdrawals, constant emotional adjustment based on the reactions they observe. And because they understand emotions so deeply, they rarely need dramatic actions to influence someone. Tiny emotional shifts become enough: a look, a pause, a softer voice, a colder silence. Everything becomes emotionally calculated, whether consciously or unconsciously. They understand human emotion well enough to weaponize it. And for many people, the terrifying part comes later, when they finally realize how accurately they were being emotionally read the entire time. Their fears were noticed, their insecurities were mapped out quietly, their emotional needs became predictable. Even their reactions during conflict slowly became expected patterns. Meanwhile, the dangerous empath remained emotionally composed through most of it, carefully adjusting emotional closeness and distance like somebody controlling pressure inside a locked room, while the other person slowly lost the ability to tell where genuine connection ended and psychological influence quietly began. Not every empath is dangerous, and not every emotionally intelligent person is manipulative. Some people truly use emotional awareness to comfort others, to heal, to protect, to create safety in a world where genuine emotional connection has become increasingly rare. But emotional awareness alone does not automatically create goodness, because empathy without emotional integrity can become extremely destructive. The ability to understand human emotion is one of the most powerful psychological abilities a person can develop. It gives someone access to fears, insecurities, emotional needs, and hidden pain that most people spend their entire lives protecting. And in the right hands, that understanding can change lives positively. But in the wrong hands, it can quietly reshape someone's emotional reality without them fully realizing it. That is what makes dangerous empaths so unsettling. They rarely look dangerous. They rarely sound dangerous. Sometimes they appear emotionally wiser than everyone around them. And that is exactly why people trust them so deeply. The most dangerous people are not always the coldest. Sometimes they are the ones who understand emotions the best, because emotional intelligence becomes far more powerful when mixed with emotional control, observation, patience, and psychological precision. Over time, they learn how to influence emotions without force, how to create attachment without obvious manipulation, how to become emotionally unforgettable inside another person's mind. And many people only recognize the pattern after the emotional damage already exists. After the confusion, after the dependency, after they slowly stopped trusting their own instincts. Because the deepest manipulation often feels like understanding at first. If this video made you see human behavior differently, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep psychological analysis, emotional behavior breakdowns, and powerful insights into the hidden patterns behind human connection.